Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Augusta. We'd like to acknowledge that here in the CSRA, that we reside on the lands of the Westo people, the Savannah Shawnees, and the Yuki peoples of the Muskogee Confederacy. And we do that in support of our mission here, our mission to create a beloved community, acting with compassion, reason, and respect, empowering us to promote a just society. My name is Reverend Nick Filzen. I'm really happy to have shaped this morning's worship with Natalia Bowdoin and with our musician, Robin Macy. And of course, we're shaping this moment together with each other, even as we speak. Everything we're doing is building on that which has been done before and that which is happening right now. It's very much a communal effort. If you are a visitor, we invite you to pull a blue card out of the seat pocket in front of you and fill it out. And if you were to fill it out and give it to one of the greeters as you exit, that will allow us to stay in touch with you and for you to stay in touch with us. Also, if you're a visitor or if you've been here for many years, we do have coffee hour following this service. And people will come up and chat with you if you have that orange name tag on, let you know that you're very much welcome here and excited to see you. And whether you're here for the first time or the 1,000th, I sincerely hope you get what you need today. I have several announcements that for things that are coming up here and for some adjustments that we're going to be playing with here in our community. First, we'll have our annual in-gathering on September 11th, which will mark the kind of the official beginning of the church year, as it were. I hope that you will bring some water from your homes and lives for our UU water ceremony, which symbolizes our connection to each other and to our blue boat home. Also on September 11th, my family is inviting you and yours to our house for a potluck party at 5 p.m. to celebrate the beginning of our second year with you all. We have plenty of outdoor space, including a screened porch and a large yard, which we hopefully can use pending whoever's up there's choice to rain or not. Please look at the corresponding Realm event for our address and parking info. Finally, there's a little bit of a longer announcement, but I want to make sure that I give you some reasoning for a change that we're going to experiment with here. Beginning in September, we're going to use exclusively digital order of services during worship. And for these primary reasons. First and foremost, there is an environmental cost to heavy use of paper, and this happens to be the heaviest use of paper that we use here. The congregation has made it clear in the past that we believe human-instigated climate change is real, and so reducing our weekly use of paper products directly reduces our carbon footprint here. Second, there is a financial cost to using a paper order of service. Again, it's by far the largest use of paper and ink usage, and that adds up. And finally, there's a human resource cost. Our wonderful office administrator, Laura Len, spends a pretty big chunk of each week creating, printing, and folding our printed order of service. And her time and energy can be refocused on other important tasks. Let's help ourselves and the world by utilizing some of the great digital tools already at our disposal. Now, I invite you to join me in fully entering this time of worship, this time of shaping that which has worth together, this time of adding to that which has been done before, adding some kind of beauty, some kind of novelty, some kind of extra thing that really helps us move into beloved community.
As we light our chalice today and move into our worship together, I offer us these words by Reverend Jennifer Grayson. We come together every week, bound not by a creed or a mutual desire to please one God or many gods. Yet we are drawn together by a belief that how we are in the world, who we are together, matters. We light this chalice together in the knowledge that love, not fear, can change this world.
Please rise in body or spirit as we sing Morning Has Come, number 1000. It's in the Teal Book or on the screen.
Good morning, everybody. This is the time in our service when we share our joys and sorrows. My name is Chris Palmer, and I'm a member of the Pastoral Care Committee. So if you'll come around here and then say your joy and sorrow, place pebble in the water. And I'll first
I'd like to invite anybody who identifies as a kid to come up and sit with me. A few of those, most of which are probably related to me in some way. And Lynn, we are going to send people out, just so you know. So we have a video to share with you all this morning that really speaks to two different areas of my life, two different big areas of my life: music and, bless you, and theology. And our worship this morning is talking about how we're always kind of becoming and adding on to what has come before, and that we're always transforming, but we never lose the beauty that started it all. And so the story we're about to see will kind of show how music doesn't really become until performers perform it and take it off the written page. So it really is kind of a yes and over time to create the thing. So let's watch this video, and then we'll have a couple of questions afterwards. Okay?
Because. Score by Mo Willems. Performance by Amber Wren. Because a man named Ludwig wrote beautiful music, a man named Franz was inspired to create his own. Because many years later, people wanted to hear Franz's beautiful music, they formed an orchestra. Because a man had practiced since he was a kid, he was asked to join. Because a woman studied night and day, she too was asked to play. Because many others loved and practiced their instruments, there were enough musicians. Because someone created a poster about Franz's music, tickets were sold. Because the train conductor stopped the train at the Grand Central Hall, the orchestra conductor arrived. Because the orchestra librarian had copies of the score, the orchestra rehearsed. Because workers checked the lights and the seats and swept the floors, the grand hall was ready. Because the time had come, the ushers opened the doors. Because someone's uncle caught a cold, someone's aunt had an extra ticket for someone special. Because the usher helped the aunt and her special guest, they found their seats. Because everyone was there to hear the beautiful music, it was quiet. In row C, seat 14, she heard the beautiful music written by the man named Franz, and it changed her. The girl was changed. From that moment on, the girl learned everything she could about music because it fed her. Soon, she started to write music too because, like Franz, the young woman had something to share. Over time, the woman became very good because she worked very hard. One night, her music was discovered because she was also very lucky. Then she was invited to perform her music at the Grand Concert Hall because so many people wanted to hear it. Her composition was dedicated to the uncle in row C, seat 14, because it was his ticket that brought her here. And that night, someone else was changed. That is how it happens.
Other than the fact that they played music by Ludwig instead of Franz, what did you think of that story? Oh, that's really great. So what's really interesting is that you were just inspired to say that because you heard her talking about ukulele, but you're inspired to play it because your mom. So there are multiple things that are inspiring you to do the new thing. And that's kind of a cool thing to think about. Thanks for sharing that story. What do you want to do that you don't know if you could do? You were inspired by your older brother Josh to code. That's awesome. Yeah, and we don't know if that's ever going to be a thing, but you're still inspired by it, and you might. There's still that possibility, and that's a really cool thing. I think that's probably all the time we have now for sharing. With that, let's sing our kids who want to go to spend some more time with their own faith formation out to their class. And thank you, Michelle, for taking that.
Waiting for the screen.
Because. Score by Mo Willem.
Somewhere in there. Do they know the words? Should I just go?
May joy surround you as you go. May you grow. Though our love is with you always as you go, as you go. That was the moment in our service where we pay special attention. We pay special attention to what's going on in our bodies and our minds, special attention to what is happening around us in the world. Just tune in a little bit more. Connect with the feeling of your body against the seat that you're sitting on, your feet on the floor if they reach, the weight that you might feel on your shoulders from your neck. And as we connect deeply into this moment, as we affirm deeply this moment, saying yes to all these things that we're experiencing, I invite you to say and also. What is that next thing that we can add? Add to this experience, add to this moment. How can we tap into our agency to make what is even more beautiful, even more beloved? How can we affirm ourselves and the next moment? Doing so with love. Love for ourselves, our neighbors, and the world. Blessed be. One way that we can add to this world in a wholesome, loving way is a way that is a tool that sometimes can be used to harm. And that's with our financial treasure, our resources that support us and support our community. This is the moment in the service where I ask you to do what you can now in a monetary way to add to our community here. And I'll start that off by adding my own gift. And with that, I invite ushers to come forward and pass the plate. Thank you all for your generosity and your stewardship. So at the end of June, Natalia and I had the great privilege of attending General Assembly, the annual get-together of all of the Unitarian Universalists from around the country. I joined in person, and Natalia used one of those digital tools we have now to join virtually. And virtually, all of the conversation we had there as part of our general sessions was around the work that the Article 2 Study Commission is doing. And just to give you a little context, Article 2 in the Unitarian Universalist Association bylaws is the area of the bylaws that talks about our covenant with other UUs around the country, other UU congregations. That includes our 7 principles, our 6 sources, a bit on inclusivity, the purpose of the UUA in itself, and also a short statement about freedom of conscience. And so again, that kind of that conversation dominated most of the time we had there, and it was all really, really inspiring. It felt great to be a part of that conversation, a conversation that started 2 years ago and will go on for another 2 years with a final vote with whatever the commission brings at the GA in 2024. So with that, wanted to not necessarily talk about the specifics of that, because there's still so much in motion there that there isn't really anything to report in terms of what the changes might be. However, Natalia and I thought it would be a good idea to make some meaning of that process, make some meaning of what that, of how that really does play into who we are as Unitarian Universalists, and just kind of play with some of this stuff. And of course, some information will be sprinkled along the way too. So with that, Natalia, what are some thoughts you have?
Well, I'll just say that I did not realize such a major thing was going on in our organization before I went to GA. And so it was a little bit of a surprise, and I felt a little bit bad that I didn't know this major thing was occurring, and felt like I hadn't paid a lot of attention, self-doubt, self-shame. But what I realized was that I had heard inklings that things with Article 2 were going to be changing, but in my mind, because I live in an academic world where we do a lot of wordsmithing, endless wordsmithing, I thought, well, that's what's going on. The UUA is getting ready to wordsmith our principles, our purpose, but nothing major is happening here. So I think that's why I didn't really tune into it. And then I was honored to be able to represent this congregation at GA. It was the first time I had been, and was excited to see what it was like. My family members have been way more involved in the back end of Unitarian Universalism administration and decision-making for a long time, but I had never been to GA. So I was excited about that, not necessarily about Article 2. But once I realized that all of GA pretty much this year was about what we're getting ready to do as a organization, it became really engaging to me and really rich for some personal reasons, and just recognizing the importance of it for our spiritual life together.
And one thing to note is that the bylaws currently require that every 15 years at least, this process be undertaken.
Mm-hmm. Undertaken.
That sounds more ominous to me, but so then it's been about 15 years since they were last revisited wholesale. There have been a little changes here and there. For example, just this morning, Natalia brought in a copy of Article 2 that had recently changed wording about non-discrimination. Now it talks about inclusivity. And so that's already been something that's been updated. And there's now basically a wholesale look at what is said in this portion of the bylaws. Again, this includes our 7 principles and our 6 sources, which I know are just beloved by a lot of us. I know that they were one of the first things to really draw me in to being a Unitarian Universalist, that I was inspired by them. What has been your experience with the principles and sources in your time as a UU?
Yeah, that's a good question, because they are very personal for me in my decision to return to the Unitarian Universalist faith. And as I think most of you know, I grew up UU in Atlanta. And we had different, Article 2 was different then when I was growing up, similar but different. And I left the UU faith for about 18 years to solely, well, I explored some other religions and then solely practiced Buddhism, and made a decision in 2007 when moving to Augusta to return to the UU faith. And a huge part of my decision was revolved around those 7 principles. I kept feeling this call to return to the UU faith, and that there were things missing in my Buddhist life that I remembered having at the UU church. So I was feeling this call, but I kept feeling like, am I ready? Is that the right thing? I'm not sure. And I kept returning again and again to the principles and reading them and saying, I agree with all this. I can uphold these. And so really they were the core to my decision to return to the UU faith. So when I heard that Article 2 is up for grabs and is going to be completely reworked, my first reaction was, wait, we can't get rid of those 7 principles, because that's why I returned, and then I'll have to go through that whole process again of, should I be here, should I not be here? But as we got into it and I was listening to the discussions happening, I realized that we are actually working towards a better place and a richer place and a transformed place, and I don't think I'm going to have to leave the UU church again. So that was a relief.
So it sounds like you kind of experienced the Ludwig portion of the UU principles, and now we're kind of in the Franz portion of the Ludwig. So like you know, new stuff always becomes because of that really important stuff. I know that when I first started as a church musician at the Unitarian Congregation of Shelter Rock up in New York, I had known nothing about the faith, this tradition, before getting hired in this role. And opening up the Great Hymnal, one of the first times I was there and saw these 7 principles, I was like, yeah, I'm with that. So yeah, there's some real deep connection for us, and I'm sure for all of us, with those things that we've promised, we've covenanted to affirm and promote as Unitarian Universalists. And that's basically what Article 2 is. Again, it's a covenant. It says we covenant to affirm and promote. And so our promises, as we live together, as we know more things, as we find out more about how the world works and how the world has worked, both its good stuff and its harmful stuff, we necessarily have to think about new ways of being with each other, new promises we make that kind of fit the moment. One kind of shorthand nickname for us has always been a living faith. We are a living faith because there is nothing set in stone. That as we all do this thing called life together, we are both allowing the faith to become and transform and kind of bloom into something new each passing moment. And living faith means that we are actually living the faith, that we are actively doing the faith. It isn't necessarily just a feeling that or some kind of obedience that we have to something else. It's more an action. So what are some things that come up for you? Like as we learn more about love, what do you think that might have to necessarily do for our principles, our sources, our purpose.
Well, I was really struck by this centering of love in the conversation that is happening right now in terms of rewriting Article 2, because if you look at our principles now, love is not in there. There's no word love. And in my Buddhist life, compassion and loving kindness is central to my Buddhist practices. And so having that word love be centered in my UU faith, really, I think will help me bring things together a little more. That word love is such a big word and such a sometimes nebulous word, and gets defined many ways. And there are different types of love. And in the Christian world, they talk about those different kinds of love. One of the things that keeps striking me and was brought up several times over GA, and looking at the videos about Article 2 online that you can find on YouTube and whatnot, is the idea that Dr. Cornel West talks about, that justice is what love looks like in public. And I really appreciate that, that sentiment and that idea that working towards justice, working towards eliminating oppression, working towards the dignity and worth of all humans is about love. And that is really important to me. When I left the UU Church and delved into Buddhism, I kept my justice work alive in Amnesty International for many years, and that was very satisfying, very fulfilling to me. But part of my returning to the UU Church was I wanted to be able to do justice work, but bring it together with a faith perspective. And that idea of love in action and love in public being justice and human rights, social justice is really key for me.
And interestingly, justice, I think, is the only word that isn't like an and or the, or, that is named twice in our current principles. So in a way, love is somehow mentioned in that. It's just kind of under the surface of all of it, right?
That's a good point.
So sometimes as we learn more and get to know more about what it is that life is, and we're finding more out about history, even though some folks are really trying hard to prevent us from finding out those things about history, that we've discovered that there is something there that we didn't think was harmful that may, in practice, end up being a little bit harmful. And I think one of those has been around kind of a misuse of our freedom of belief clause in our current principles and purposes, that Article 2. One thing that has kind of popped up within that is that people often use that freedom of belief clause as a way to overlook the inclusivity clause, which actually comes before it. That there's this notion that I can believe what I want here, and to hell with if I hurt somebody else with that. And that's something that's being closely examined in this process as well. You had shared with me a picture you took of some questions about that the freedom of belief clause, and I didn't print it out like I was going to. Do you happen to remember what the question was? That it's kind of a good question to think about.
I think I don't remember that, actually. I do remember discussion about inclusion and what inclusion means to us, how we live that out. And I've been engaged with a number of conversations about inclusion in other worlds of mine, in my academic world, about do we live out inclusion in a way that is, do we manifest our idea of inclusion as you are welcome here, come into my home, but don't change anything, and in some ways that tension between freedom of belief and that idea of inclusion kind of gets that statement of welcome to my home, but don't change anything, kind of gets to that tension that you're talking about. there. I don't remember
No
the
worries.
specific questions. My
It's
apologies.
my fault for not bringing it out.
No blame here.
Yeah, and for me, like if you are going to wait, if you're going to give some equity to these two different things, which another word that's named in our principles and purposes, that it actually that we actually have. I center and hope that we all center the love at the heart of our faith. That inclusion clause, that's weighted a little bit more than the freedom of belief, and it's important that we live in that ambiguity a little bit. Like it doesn't necessarily have a clear answer, and that's kind of okay. If we're looking for clarity, if we're looking for an absolute there, that's probably going to end up causing more harm than not. So I mean, we've already changed many times in our history, right? Like as you mentioned, you had a whole different set, even like basically the same, but also different when you first started as a UU. And I know that
lots of male language.
Lots,
There was
yes.
a lot of male language.
Yeah, even in the last 10 years in the sources, it was updated to say prophetic. It used to say prophetic men and women, and now it says prophetic people. And I think that's an important change to really lean into the inclusivity that we aspire to and that we affirm. It's not novel. It's not novel that we are looking at this to see how at the heart of our faith becomes as we become, as the world becomes. One thing that some of you may be aware of is that there is a movement kind of UUA-wide to adopt an eighth principle, which basically talks about creating beloved community by breaking down oppressions and actively doing some work to break down those oppressions in ourselves and in our communities. And as of GA, how many communities?
At GA, there were 216 churches that had adopted the eighth principle already. So that's quite a number.
It's roughly half of Unitarian Universalist congregations, about 500, right, in the country. Yeah. There's 1,000. Also look at that number. I want to know. I should know that number. Yeah. But there's already momentum from the ground to kind of update things, to kind of to say that these are the things that matter to us. That we're people have already said yes and to this, to what we may be in the future.
And what I understand, and others probably know this much more deeply, but my understanding is part of the eighth principle movement, which began in 2017, was part of the momentum to say, we really need to look at our principles and the whole bylaws as a whole in a more dramatic way, and really think about them. Not only is it required in the bylaws, UUA bylaws, to do that, but here this eighth principle movement is starting. And where are we going with our principles and our purpose and our heritage? Are we just going to keep adding on to the list of principles until we have a long list? As we evolve as people, are we just going to keep on adding principles? Why don't we look at the whole thing and see how we can make it meaningful today, bring us into the now, and look towards the future in a way that is just not about adding on another principle every time we evolve in our humanity.
In a way that really affirms the work of our ancestors. There's nothing being set aside. It's just yes and over and over again. Something new is becoming. And I think it's important for folks who have been Unitarian Universalists for decades that there's going to be some grief that we feel when we lose something on which we have grounded a lot of our worldviews, a lot of the way that we are with each other. And Natalia and I both felt strongly that we needed to name that grief as we spoke today. I'm sure that people are a little nervous about these impending changes, and that's perfectly valid. I feel you. I have always loved these principles, and I also want to name the celebratory aspect of it. You want to say anything about that?
No, I think you're right. There, with change, there just is always a little bit of grief and sadness not always, but generally. And but what we can create can be more meaningful to us, can be more representative of who we are. And so there is that aspect of joy and celebration. So we can hold both things at the same time. A therapist once told me when I was struggling with both anger and excitement, she said, you know, you are allowed to have 2 flavors of ice cream at the same time. And I take her up on that every time I go to the ice cream place.
My world just expanded.
There you go. So I think we need to hold that as we move forward with this. Let's have both flavors. Let's have as many flavors as we want. As we move forward.
Yeah, it's being in that place of ambiguity that feels uncomfortable, but also is just full of possibility. So for that, I'm very much excited and in celebration of the way that we are hoping to be together. And one thing that I thought you made a great point about who this applies to once this is fully done, and the process itself. Who is being asked to be involved?
So the process, at GA this last year, there were many discussions, feedback sessions where we were able to give thoughts, how we think about these things. So the next step is that the study commission working on Article 2 will present to the board some draft language in January. And that will be presented at GA next year. So it's going to be a pretty important GA next year. And there will be discussions about this draft language. There will be, I believe there will be some changes to potential language at that time, but then there will be a vote about should we even move forward with this. So next year is not the vote on the language, it's the vote on do we move forward with this. And if the majority says yes, let's move forward, we move forward. If the majority says no, then we stop everything and we're stuck right here where we are.
It's a fine place to be stuck.
It's fine, and then some of us won't grieve, but we may not have the excitement flavor. So that will happen next year at GA, and then if it does move forward, there will be conversations, things that happen in the ensuing year, but then the final vote on the language will be that GA in 2024. And that will require a 2/3 yes vote by the delegates. So that's a pretty hefty bar, 2/3. So it will be an interesting GA. Both of these next 2 years will be very interesting. And then if it is approved, that is what we, as the UU Church of Augusta, agree to live in covenant with other UU churches and other UU fellowships and other UU bodies in our country.
Obviously, a very, very methodical, long, almost 5-year process from when it started, which I think is a process that, from all that I can see, is just steeped in love. They're really trying their best to live into the values that they're trying to enhance. They're embodying these things. And the process itself is, living into the heart of our faith, which is love. And that's something that I hope that we all can take with us, that as we go through these processes to become and transform and live into what we aspire to be and affirm, that it's that love that is at the core of all we do and say, and that we go forward today and in the future, doing all we can to lift up those values. And with that, thank you for having the conversation with me, Natalia.
Thank you. Thanks for helping me make meaning.
Yes.
No.
Please rise in body or spirit as we sing the Fire of Commitment, our final hymn on 1028. And if you're in the hymnal, it's the teal one again.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. In the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, and our promise finds fulfillment, and our future can begin. From the stories of our living brings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment, and our future can begin. Dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment, and our future can begin. I invite you to remain standing if your spirit wills you to. As we say these closing words by Erica Hewitt, to be a Unitarian Universalist means we'll never be done with the work.
The work of telling the truth about oppression, the work of resisting any laws, policies, or practices that deny anyone their humanity, the work of stubbornly seeking out the spark of the divine in each other, no matter what, the work of creating heaven on earth.
To be a Unitarian Universalist also means we're not alone in the work.
We are not alone because of our promises to love one another. We are not alone because we are companions on the journey. We grow ourselves into allies, helping one another get free, because none of us is truly free until we are all free.